I don't have time for this. Last I checked, you're not my sponsor anymore.
Look, just keep your side of the road clean.
Don't worry, it is. I gotta go, man. 10 years ago, I came to Venice by accident.
West Side, represent.
Let me rephrase that. I came to Venice because of an accident. My best thinking tells me that it's okay to get loaded and get behind the wheel of a car. But the people in these rooms got me back on my feet.
That was lame of you not to show up.
Sorry, I would have called, but you know, I don't have a phone.
You have a phone at work.
Yeah, but it's a work phone.
What are we doing here?
Just making stools for people to sit on.
They got a new waitress.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, but I saw her first.
You guys okay over here?
Yeah, I'm good.
You are unbelievable, man. Please don't take that as a compliment. So did you go see Tilly?
Who's Tilly?
Just a friend.
His wife.
Ex-wife.
Oh, so you're still married?
I'm trying to untangle my past.
I can't even tell when you're lying anymore. I don't think you can either.
Look, Chip, it's time to look forward now.
I can't do this.
Come on, man. There's no time like the present.
No, I mean, there's no handle on it. I can't do this door.
Yeah, I gotta let you out.
Maybe it's time for you to make a fresh start. Sometimes it's good to let go of the past.
The only thing I can do is just try to be a better person.
The truth is, Chip is a selfish asshole.
Chip's a complicated guy. You were willing to jeopardize our friendship for this girl?
Come on, Dennis. Let's talk.
No, it's not gonna cut it.
Wait, you can't let a friendship die. Be dudes, like we're all dudes here.
Well put, Cooler.
Thank you.
You are you. Wherever you are, you should be excited to find that out.
When I first moved to Venice, things got a lot worse before they got better. But this community taught me to be honest about who I am and what I've done. And to draw a line that separates your past from your future.
I like this place. It's like an online community, but in real life, you know?
Like a community.
Yeah.
Will, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for giving me a microphone.
You're welcome. It was made for you. Congratulations on Flaked. This is a show that you're not only the star of now, but you have co-created this. You've written every episode, essentially.
That's right. I co-created it. I created and wrote it with my partner, Mark Chappell. Some people might know him from Todd Margaret fame. He's an English gentleman. I mean that he's from England, not that he speaks English. So Mark and I created this weird little thing out of nothing.
What was the impetus for it? Because it's definitely a different vibe than what I think we know you for. Actually, to be perfectly honest, I think it sort of takes a certain element of what we see in BoJack and sort of and drives that a little bit further.
Yeah, I think that I think that there are similarities, and I know that people have kind of tried to sort of draw a line between those two, between BoJack and Flaked. If anything, the connection is that both BoJack and Chip are broken, but they're broken in kind of different ways, and that's always something that I've been attracted to. I like characters that are kind of deeply flawed, and that are somehow broken. You know, I've played characters that are broken in a much sort of bigger archway.
Joe
Bluth from Arrested Development. He was broken, but he's potentially a sociopath. Doesn't know how to live in this real world. Would not know how to come here, get here. He can't do anything. Chip, for me, was a character who's much more grounded and much more accessible and much more sort of realistic. And I, initially wanted to tell a story. For a long time, I wanted to write a show kind of based in Venice, California. I always thought it was an interesting place. I lived there on and off over the years. I lived here, of course, but I would go out there to work. And when I was first shooting Arrested Development, I lived out there for a few years and lived in Venice. And I always thought it was a very interesting place because it is like the home of reinvention. You can go to Venice and become and be basically whomever you want to be. And I always thought that was kind of an interesting, to have a place like that where people can go and kind of really reinvent themselves. Always kind of fascinated me,
And Chip, in many ways, has kind of reinvented himself, but he still has, as you said, a lot of those flaws that are kind of behind the curtain. He presents himself one way, and then behind the curtain, he's still sort of, in many ways, addicted to kind of screwing up.
Absolutely. And I think that he's a guy who has gone there and he's become a big fish in a small pond, which is another theme I really like. And he's created this persona.
Why do you think that you're attracted to that theme?
Of the big fish in the small pond? Just because when you see them then kind of get rattled and kind of thrown out of, when they get kind of taken out of rhythm, it's very jarring to them because they can't believe, because they feel so secure in what they've created, and potentially, it's actually like they don't seem to have a kind of a global sense necessarily, and so they're so self-serving and in maintaining that, that when that gets kind of shaken up, they really struggle. But I think that Chip is a guy who has created this persona. He's got this very hard story, and Chip is we set up that Chip is a kind of he's got a lot of sway in the sober community in Venice. It's not a show about AA. We don't even say really AA. Mark and I were trying to think about how many times we actually say AA in the show, and then we're like, wait, I don't think we even actually say it once.
Less about AA and more about recovery and a certain amount of sobriety, and sobriety as a sort of veneer or some.
Yeah, and it's about every person's relationship with their own sobriety, and with that I mean the relationship with the truth to who they are. There are a lot of issues of like authenticity in there. All these, these are kind of the themes that that we wanted to kind of explore, and the ultimate one is, when we all have this sort of face that we show the world, and cultivated or authentic. And then there's the face that we look at in the mirror when we go home. And if the divide between those two is too big, that person is generally in trouble, on a personal level. And we wanted to explore that.
Well, it becomes harder and harder to look at the one in the mirror at home because it's so far away from the thing that you've been doing all day.
Without question, yeah. And so, here is a guy who has really gone out of his way to kind of construct this persona. And now it's being chipped away at.
Hence the name, right? Wow, unbelievable,
Yes,
unbelievable.
I just thought of that. No, but that's
symbolism with this show is just really. Would you say the chips are sort of flaking as well as they?
He's a
fall
bit of a
off?
flake. God, that's also crazy.
So what was the impetus behind wanting to do something that was, I would say, approached much heavier themes, but was in certain ways a bit more subtle than a network television, a network comedy?
Well, I think that Mark and I both have similar sensibilities. We the kinds of films that and programs and comedy that we like is probably skews towards a drier side. And
can you name like a would talk about while you were writing?
Our mutually favorite film is, Mark and I are soulmates, by the way, so that's why I keep talking about him. Is With Nail and I, which is kind of for me like the ultimate. Yeah. It's a perfect film. There's not a wasted moment. And it's not necessarily a comedy, and it's not necessarily a drama. And I always like that, because life is like that. It's not like you don't just have a funny day and a dramatic day. Everything kind of happens at once. And I felt like, so often I've been I was part of things that are just like a comedy, a zany comedy, a whatever. And I wanted to do something that was much more reflective of what I like and my experience is. And we wanted to write something that was also sort of reflective of the way that people speak. We wanted to tell a story about male friendship in a non-macho way that doesn't revolve around dudes talking about fantasy football and a bunch of bullshit like that, which is how often male friendships are depicted in sort of mainstream media.
Always sort of, mainstream media is like always announcing that it's a male friendship.
Yeah, it's
right?
male friendship, and we're going to the sporting event and whatever.
Because we're men, it's male.
Because we're
male
men.
friendship.
Exactly. And not that I don't like sports. It's just it doesn't need to be one way or the other. And by the way, I'm so punk rock, right? That I'm railing against mainstream media. But
sports.
I'm not taking. I want to make sure to stress that I don't take myself and all of it too seriously. It's just what I like.
Well, no, With Nail and I think is a really great comparison, or at least a great sort of touchstone as an inspiration for a show like this. And I didn't even think of that when I was watching, but now that you say that, I can absolutely see it between the friendship between Chip and essentially his best friend on the show.
Yeah,
it's
Chip
definitely
and
not
Dennis, and we actually we make a couple subtle homages to With Nail. You know, we're big, like I said, big fans of the film, big fans of Bruce Robinson. I once had the occasion to meet Richard Grant at a restaurant in Los Angeles. I was sitting with Mitch Hurwitz of Arrested Development fame, and Mitch said, "Richard E. Grant just walked in. You have to go say hi to him." And I said, "Absolutely not. I don't want to bother the guy." And he said, "This will never happen again. Have you ever run into him in your life?" I said, "No."
because Richard E. Grant's everywhere.
You'll never see him again. And he said, I was like, "Yeah, you're right." So I sort of made my way towards the men's room and like stopped and just kind of barfed at him. "My name is Will. I'm an actor, and your performance in With Nail and I was so, the most influential piece of art ever. And I'll let you continue your dinner." And I didn't even give him a chance to respond. And then
That's the way to do it.
And then I just walked away because I didn't want to. I didn't want him to feel like I didn't want it to feel incumbent upon him to have to then reciprocate or pretend that he knew where I was or nothing. Just
You also don't want to have to soak up the response that a fan usually gets, which is the usual, "Oh, thank you. Let me go back to eating."
Yes, no, I didn't want any of it. Yeah, I didn't want to be blown off the way that I blow people off. You know.
It's not really a blow off. I'd say it's the only right thing most actors and people in the public eye can do in situations like that. There's nothing else you can really do other than like, "Thank you. I'm going to go back to."
It's very different. There are very few situations. I mean, by the way, yes, it's always great when somebody says, "Hey, I like your work," or "Thanks very much for the entertainment," or whatever. But beyond "Thank you very much," there's not much you can do. It is awkward because it's not it's not a natural occurrence. We're not equipped to know how to deal with that.
Right. And where does the conversation go? It can't really go anywhere. So there's always kind of.
Yeah, and especially if you're like trapped, sometimes it can get super awkward. I've had it happen like at the gym before. I hang around men's locker rooms a lot.
The show's not about that, but Will's
not,
life is about
not
that.
Yet. So anyway.
We'll move on from the men's locker room approach. So when you go into writing something like this, I would say that a difference between With Nail and something like this is that if you were to be the With Nail, you're definitely a much more subtle portrait of a With Nail type of character. Definitely not as sort of outlandish as Richard E. Grant is in that film.
Yeah, for sure. But sort of thematically, the idea that these guys, the way that they talk with each other, their references, everything stylistically is much more in tune. It's not playing to the lowest common denominator, and there is a sort of a tragic undercurrent to all of it, and certainly with Flake there is that. It's not a drama, but and the show does move, and there is a sort of a lightness with the way that the characters speak, and it's all by design, and we want people to feel that it's funny, but we want the comedy to. We always wanted the comedy to come out of the way that the characters interact with each other and the way that they talk and the things that they say, but that the comedy kind of obscures the drama in their lives. And that they, certainly Chip uses comedy to deflect from what's really going on. And I think, if I'm being honest, that's something that I've probably historically done in my life. And so it became very true to me. When Mark and I first started writing the show, it was about the character of Chip was the first thing that we talked about. We just kind of broke down this guy who lives in Venice. We didn't really know exactly where we were going yet. And we just started talking about this character Chip. And for me, Chip was representative of a lot of things that I kind of railed against in other people, the things I disliked. He was incredibly dishonest. He was just he was a liar. And, you know, if you've ever sort of been confronted with somebody who's constantly lying to you, it's very disconcerting because you can't get a solid footing if you're dealing with somebody who's totally dishonest. And that was sort of the initial focus, was creating this guy who has created this face for everybody, but he's just a fucking liar. As we got deeper into writing the episodes, you know, you start informing the characters in the world with stuff from your own life, and we started infusing Chip with things. You know, Mark and I would sit around and exchange stories and talk about things, and you start, you know, lending things from your own life, and it starts to bleed into the character, and then it all kind of became like this big sort of melting pot of things you disliked in other people, and eventually also things that I disliked about myself. And it was a very sort of revealing process, and it ended up being a very sort of a personal and difficult process.
Well, I think what's interesting about Chip, we talk about him being a liar. He's not necessarily a liar because he's sleazy or malicious. He's a liar because he's lying to himself the whole time. He can never really get past his mistakes or be open about his mistakes.
Yeah, no, his lies aren't exactly, and his lies are more. They're not about sort of like stupid, nonsensical lies. These are lies that are, you know, we talk often about shading. He's constantly shading the truth. And ultimately, the person he is lying to the most is himself. And he knows it. And that eats away at it. And he's filled with shame. And shame eats away at your victories. You know, and certainly
they're kind of like the lies that you say that are that start with telling yourself that they're okay to tell. Like, if I don't tell someone the truth here, I'm just not hurting their feelings.
Exactly right. I'm sparing them their feelings.
Yeah, and then it kind of snowballs into more and more lies, and you're living a certain amount. You're living a lie with someone at a certain point.
That's right, and you can, and Chip certainly can always justify all of them right to the end. But ultimately, he's kind of creates this untenable position for himself.
Talk about the music and the crew behind this.
That's Chip right there. That's the guy we're talking about.
Look at those sunglasses.
That guy.
Beach in Venice.
That guy.
The first 3 episodes, or the first 2 episodes, are directed by Wally Feister, who was Christopher Nolan's DP. He's just a famous Hollywood cinematographer at this point. How did you get him involved in the show?
So Wally Pfister.
Pfister, excuse me.
Yeah, no, and Feister sounds better. If you think about it.
That's where I was going.
He ought to change his, because he didn't know her. But Wally is somebody that we went to one of these Hollywood parties, guys. They do exist, by the way, and they're the worst. No, we went to a friend's house, and I didn't, you know, of course, I sort of vaguely knew who Wally was. He's an iconic cinematographer. He DP'd, or, you know, he shot most of Chris Nolan's movies, all the Batman films, et cetera. He won the Academy Award for Inception. Truly one of the great cinematographers of our time and of his generation. But we're at this party. I was there with Mark, and we were just starting to write kind of really in earnest at that point. And Mark went to get a drink, and I ran into another friend, and he said, "Oh, this is my friend Wally." And I ended up talking to him for about 20 minutes, half an hour, and we ended up rather quickly kind of talking about our lives and where we were in our lives and what we were unhappy about and what we were sort of laughing. And then Mark came back, and I said, "Oh, Mark, this is Wally." He goes, "Yeah, Wally Pfister." And Mark, who's an Englishman, I think I pointed that out before, who, you know, generally they are very reserved. I've never seen him get so excited about meeting somebody. And he's met a lot of people, you know, since he's been in LA. He like made me hold his drink, and he got his phone out, and he wanted to take a photograph. And Mark's wife is a cinematographer in the UK. And he's like, "My wife will be so excited." And then Wally could only say, "Thank you," as we already
Call back.
discussed that. But so anyway, we ended up kind of getting to know Wally socially, and we started telling him about the show. And then the next night, randomly, we ran into him at dinner again at another friend's house, and we started talking more about the show. And he's like, "Let me take a look at it." And then we actually, before we let him read it, we told him about the opening we wanted to do that we originally had, and he was like, "Oh, I'll shoot it for you guys." And we're like, "Oh my God, Wally Pfister is going to shoot our opening."
It's incredible.
Yeah, like incredible, right? And
I mean, in
that'd be
Hollywood,
like if you're directing an NYU student film, and De Niro's like, yeah, I'll come and do a scene in your student film.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're like, oh, okay, sounds great, man. You know. So then we sent him the script, and he called us, and we sent him the first 2 scripts, and he called us, and he said, I got to come over. And we were writing at this at my house, and we're like, all right. And he came over, and he brought his computer with him, and he's like, I've gone to Venice since reading the scripts, and I've taken all these photographs, and it's really inspired me. And he took all these photographs that were so right in tune tonally with how we wanted the show to look. And of course, the photographs, they're like 100 photographs he took. They're like 100 of the most beautiful photographs you've ever seen. And he just whipped them off.
The show does look beautiful. It has its own look. And when you talk about setting a show in Venice, I can't think off the top of my head a number of shows that take place in Venice. So it immediately does create its own world. It's a
I mean, I think the only other show that's actually set in Venice is the Californication. That I don't think is on anymore, but they didn't really shoot there. I mean, they did, but I think that all the shots of Venice, I've never seen it, but what I understand is, and I'm sure it's great.
Never seen it, but I'm sure it's great.
All the shots of Venice that they use are kind of like the interstitial, like between scenes, but they never actually, for us, because we know Venice so well, we wanted to make sure that we captured it authentically. After writing the first paragraph about Chip, the first outline that Mark and I wrote, really, the first paragraph was just a description of the light in Venice. Because it's so specific, especially in the afternoon, and you get this kind of sort of hazy, misty, foggy oceanside, and the sun hitting it at a certain light, and the California sun. There's just like it's a very specific look, and we wanted to capture that. And Wally understood that, and he really helped us. And he helped. He hired this DP. He was like, there's this guy Bryce Fortner who shot the first 5 seasons of Portlandia, randomly enough, and he said, you know, I think that Bryce is a really brilliant guy, and we're like, well, obviously we'll defer to you when it comes to DP. You know, imagine if we were like, nah, I don't think so. You're wrong, Wally Pfister.
Well, talk about. I mean, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and so he brought Bryce on, and then between the two of them, they really created a look. And I actually can say this because I didn't do it. I didn't actually shoot this part of it. I would argue, I don't know if there's another television show that looks like this. I'm so proud of what those guys did. It's incredible.
I'll accept that argument. It's absolutely true. From someone who watches a lot of television and has to do a lot of these interviews, there isn't really a show that looks like this at all in terms of the sun-drenched streets of Venice.
Yeah.
All of these sort of exterior walk and talks around Venice that you normally wouldn't see. Usually you get like one walk and talk, and then you'd go to the studio setup. You know.
No, we shot the whole thing on location in Venice, except for Chip's store, which we actually had to double and shoot a few miles east. But everything else was shot on location. We shot in the restaurant Jelena. If any of you have ever been to Venice, you know it's a kind of one of the great restaurants there, and they've never let anybody shoot there and still haven't. But we got to know them. We spent a lot of time there just because we're there, and so they let us shoot there, which was remarkable.
Talk about the music. Stephen Malcolmus does the music for the show, which is he does the intro, but that's amazing. You got Stephen Malcolmus of Pavement. I don't know if he's ever done the music for a show or a movie before.
He has not, and I'm a huge Pavement fan and huge fan of also Steve's work, his solo work, and we had a few different sort of ideas for bands and music that we wanted to use, but pretty early on, Mark and I talked about the idea of Steve Malcolmus as like, imagine if we could get him to be somehow part of the show. So last year, I got his email through like 3 other people, reached out to him, and ended up having a phone call with him. And I talked to him for about an hour and told him about the show. And he's like, well, I've never done anything like this, but send me the scripts. So I sent him the scripts, and then I didn't hear anything from him for like 6 weeks. I was like, well, he hated the scripts, so... But then our music supervisor, the great Chris Doritas, who's a fantastic DJ and music supervisor, came aboard, and he encouraged me to reach back out. And then he reached back out, and Steve was like, oh, no, I liked it. Sorry, I've just been busy. And he's an interesting guy. You know, Steve lives in Portland, and he's a super family man and super involved with his kids, and he just got kind of busy. So... we sort of re-engaged and asked him to compose for the show. And he's like, look, I've never done it before, but I'll do my best. and of course his best was unreal.
Yeah.
And we had so many moments. We had originally had an idea for an opening theme song. It was an existing song from the band Django Django, and then Steve wrote his piece, and we're like, this is incredible. And then, as we were going through the process, the way it works is you cut the show together, and then you do a sort of a music spotting, and we would send the cuts to Steve in Portland, and he'd go to his basement at night and record stuff, and then send us pieces of music for all the different spots. And every day, like, each piece got better and better. And we had so many moments where he bailed us out by his incredible artistry. We had a song that we wanted to use, Trevor Powers from Youth Lagoon, formerly Youth Lagoon, R.I.P. Trevor had given us a couple songs, and then he'd sent us a song that we used in the second episode that's like a really great song called I've Seen, and it was unreleased at that time, and then the record company got involved, et cetera. And we were about to mix that show, and we sort of Hail Mary called to Steve Malkmus, and he's like, all right, show up at the mix that day. And he sent down this piece of music, and it's unbelievable. It just saved the show, and it was just amazing. And like, he's just, to me, but the best moment for me was, for Steve Malkmus, was two things. Once he had written a piece for the show, and I had to say to him, and I felt like such a dick because I don't understand music. I mean, I appreciate music, but I can't read music or anything. And so I'd go like, Steve, that was awesome. Is there any way, like, could maybe less drums and bass and maybe more just that guitar, just maybe more like, and I have to sound like a total idiot. And he's like, yeah, I said it, I apologize, I got it. But then ultimately, one day I had to ask him there's a song that we use at the end of one of our episodes, and I said, is there any way that you would cover Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville? And he said yes, and it's now in the show, and so when you watch the show, you get to listen to the world premiere of Steve Malkmus's Margaritaville.
So, I mean, you're involved in this show essentially from beginning to end, writing it. You're working with them a little bit on the look, even though it seems like Wally kind of took that over with his DP. But then you're working with Stephen Malkmus on the music. This is you from beginning to end. What does that feel like? Is that a stressor, or does it feel liberating to have this sort of responsibility of a show?
Well, it almost killed me. So, no, yeah. I mean. It definitely is my baby in that sense, and mine and Mark's. And Mark and I, Mark, who's here, by the way, he's at the back of the room, and he's very modest, and he won't even put his hand up. He's looking around. Yeah, especially in television, I always say it's not really TV, it's Netflix, although I feel like I'm stealing that from somebody else. But anyway.
I think yeah.
But in this medium, the writer is kind of king, is the boss, and you have to do everything. So Mark and I wrote it, and we cast it, and even on set, the conversations are always with the director is there, but also Mark and I get kind of final say. It's a collaboration. We're not like tyrants. And then, of course, yeah, in post-production, editing and stuff, that Mark and I cut the shows with the editors and all the way through the end. Yeah.
I think we have to turn it over to audience questions. Anyone have any questions out here in the audience?
Hey, well, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
No problem. So, actually, your last point was a nice segue into my question. You mentioned Job and his long character arc. It's kind of a long form. It's got multiple seasons for him to kind of develop. And Christopher Mintz-Plasse says something in the trailer to the effect of this like digital age we're living in with the internet community. So it's clearly in the back of your head, and you know that you're writing this show for Netflix. So I'm curious how much that affects your writing process, knowing very well that a lot of people are gonna binge watch this, with the development and the progression of the character and the storyline, if anything changes, and as an actor too, if you have to rush things or not, or if you approach it the same way.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I think that we definitely wrote this show for Netflix. We couldn't have done it I don't think we could have done it anywhere else, really. And we approached it. We didn't even write within the sort of the usual 3-act construct. Mark and I had an idea of where we saw the show going. We had an 8-episode for a season. We knew exactly where we wanted to get to. When we first broke the season, actually, Mark and I wrote them, but we did a room for 2 weeks before we started. We presented where we saw the show going, and we brought 5 or 6 other writers in for 2 weeks and threw ideas around, and that room was amazing. It was Mitch Hurwitz, Raphael Bob Waxberg, who created BoJack, Caroline Williams, who wrote on Arrested and BoJack, Chad Ginden, Mahar, who writes on BoJack. Like, it was amazing. Yeah, Jim Valley from Arrested Development worked on it. Like, just amazing.
Now, when you bring those people in, are you looking for sort of to help you with plot points, guiding the story, or is it more like you have the plot points and you're looking for sort of bits or jokes that can happen within these things?
No, we were looking for story ideas to help us break new stories and to just to help us out, and it was a very, very useful experience for us. But we did always know that people were going to watch the shows in that Netflix way, the binging, if you will, and that was very much in our minds. And yeah, it affects every part. It affects the way that you write it. It affects the way that you perform. That people aren't gonna end an episode and then wait 7 days to see the next one. We really approached it like we were making an independent film told across 8 episodes with like bathroom breaks in between.
I think a good example of that is there's one plot point, I don't necessarily want to give away a spoiler, but in regards to the store, where that would be a storyline on a network in one episode. To be like, this is the conflict, we have to figure this out by the end of 22 minutes, whereas with this, we're dipping back into it over the course of the entire 8 episodes and watching it sort of progress and get away from him.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about writing for and working with Netflix. Because they're not slaves to ratings, and they don't release ratings, much to the chagrin of everybody else, and all the other networks are going crazy, attacking them for not releasing their ratings. It's pretty funny. All the dudes from the other networks are like, "How you must do it," and they're like, "Why? No, we don't."
They've like
Shut
taken
the
out,
fuck up.
It's like taking out private investigators on them and stuff,
It's
right?
true.
Like,
There's this one dude, and it's like, to their credit, I mean, why would they? Once you release ratings, then you're always held up to that standard, and everything else is measured against that. Why the fuck would they do that? They can choose the kind of program they want based on whether they like it or not. How about that? Whether it's good or not. What a novel idea. Not based on stupid fucking ratings. Right? Death to ratings. Let's hit the streets. We started a revolution, man. This is insane. Anyway, yes.
Next question.
Hi, Will.
Hi.
So I hope you don't mind, but I also wanted to ask a question related to Arrested because I think you did an incredibly amazing job playing Job. So if you could go back in time and play any other character on the show, Tobias, Michael, even a female character, if you could, who would it be?
Other than Job. What character would I... Not Michael. Snooze much? Bateman. Gosh, I don't know. I suppose, I want to play a character who is fun, but I would never suppose that I could do what any of those other people did. I have such tremendous respect for, obviously, like a character like Tobias is so fun, but David consistently found new, interesting, funny ways to play that part. So inventive. Tony Hale as Buster absolutely inhabited that character. Nobody made me laugh on set more than Tony Hale. He was so committed that even sometimes getting ready for a take, if we both be like outside the door of like the model home or whatever and gonna walk in together, and you'd see him start to inhabit Buster, and I couldn't look at him because I'd have tears in my eyes laughing. He's such a bizarrely just amazing, hilarious, committed performer. But all down the line, everybody, Tambor, Jessica, Portia, Mike, Sarah, Alia, everybody was amazing. So I don't think that I could have Maybe Job 2? Was that a character?
Will, I have to let you go. Congratulations on Flaked, a really incredible show and such a departure for you. It's really interesting. Netflix this Friday, right?
This Friday, March 11th, Netflix. Be there.
Congratulations, Will. Thank you so much for being
here.
here.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks, man.